A 17-year-old girl sits in a car with her boyfriend in a bowling alley parking lot. It is late at night in February 1974. Suddenly, the car door is ripped open. A man stands there holding a gun. Without warning, he starts striking the boyfriend in the head with the weapon. The boyfriend suffers severe injuries under the force of the blows. Then the man points the gun at the boyfriend's face and pulls the trigger. Nothing. He pulls it again, but the gun is jammed. The girl is screaming. The man grabs her by the hair and drags her out of the car. The boyfriend tries to hold on to her, but he is losing too much blood. His vision is fading. His grip weakens. The man throws the girl into his truck and drives away into the darkness. 3 days later, police find her body dumped in a ditch 5 miles away. She has been subjected to extreme violence and taken from this world with bare hands. Her face is covered in scratches and bruises from fighting for her life. The perpetrator disappears. For 46 years, he walks free. He raises a family. He goes to church every Sunday. He lives right there in the same city, pretending to be a normal man. But what made him target this innocent girl? How did he escape justice for nearly half a century? And what finally brought him down? Carla Jan Walker was 17 years old and lived in Benbrook, Texas, just outside Fort Worth. She was a cheerleader at Western Hills High School and dreamed of becoming a veterinarian one day. She stood only 4 feet 11 inches tall. Friends described her as sweet, kind, and full of life. Carla was dating Rodney McCoy, the quarterback of their high school football team. On February 16, 1974, Rodney took Carla to their school's Valentine's Day dance. After the dance ended around 11:30 p.m., they drove around with friends before dropping them off. Around 1 a.m., Carla asked to stop at a bowling alley so she could use the restroom. The Brunswick Ridgely Bowl was closing for the night. After using the bathroom, Carla returned to the car and got in the passenger seat. Rodney turned off the engine. They were just 2 teenagers talking and relaxing in the parking lot. Neither of them noticed the danger approaching. Without warning, the passenger door was ripped open. A man stood there. Before Rodney could react, the man started viciously striking him in the head with a pistol, again and again. His face was covered in injuries. The man then pointed the gun directly at Rodney's face and pulled the trigger. Click. The gun jammed. He pulled it 3 more times. Click, click, click. Each time, the gun failed to fire. Rodney was 18 years old. He had never experienced violence like this. He was terrified and bleeding badly. The man looked at Carla and said, "You're coming with me, aren't you, sweetie?" Carla screamed and begged not to go, but the man kept striking Rodney with the gun. Finally, Carla yelled that she would go with him if he just stopped hurting Rodney. The man grabbed Carla and yanked her out of the car. Rodney tried to hold onto her arm, but he was losing consciousness from the head injuries. The last thing Rodney heard was Carla screaming, "Go get my dad!" Then Rodney passed out from the blood loss. When he woke up minutes later, Carla was gone. Rodney started the car and drove straight to Carla's house, running red lights and passing cars dangerously. He crashed into their front yard and ran to the door, covered in blood, screaming, "Mr. Walker, they got her!" Police were called immediately. Carla's father grabbed his gun and drove to the bowling alley, searching everywhere. But Carla had vanished. At the bowling alley parking lot, police found only 2 clues: a magazine clip for a .22 Ruger pistol lying on the pavement, and Carla's purse that had fallen from the car. Rodney gave police a description. The attacker was about 5 feet 10 inches tall, around 175 pounds, with short brown hair, mid to late 20s, and wearing a vest. A massive search began. Police, family, friends, students, and community members searched for days. But there was no sign of Carla anywhere. The Walker family held on to hope. Maybe someone would drop her off. Maybe she would come home. They could not imagine that someone would actually harm her. On February 20th, 1974, just 4 days after she was taken, 2 Fort Worth police officers were searching culverts and ditches. At 6:35 p.m., about 5 miles from the bowling alley, they made a devastating discovery. Inside a cement culvert, they found 17-year-old Carla Walker's body. She was lying face down. Her beautiful dress from the dance was torn, ripped, and covered in blood. Her underwear and pantyhose were found 12 feet away, along with the promise ring her boyfriend had given her. The autopsy revealed the full horror of what Carla had endured. She had been manually asphyxiated. There were no marks from rope or wire, only deep bruising that showed powerful hands squeezing the life out of her. Her face and neck were covered with scratches and defensive wounds. She had fought hard to survive. She had been subjected to a serious criminal assault. She had been injected with morphine, and according to medical examiners, she had been kept alive for up to 2 days after being kidnapped, suffering unimaginable cruelty before finally being taken from this world. Carla's parents were asked to identify her body at the morgue. Her 12-year-old brother Jim stayed in the waiting room. Years later, he would say he could never forget the sound of his mother's scream when she saw Carla's body. He described it as the sound of a wild animal, something he had never heard before and would never forget. Over 1,000 people attended Carla's funeral. An entire community mourned this innocent girl whose life had been stolen. Police had very few leads. They created a list of everyone in the Fort Worth area who owned a .22 Ruger pistol. One name on that list was Glenn Samuel McCurley, a 31-year-old truck driver. Detectives went to his home and questioned him. Glenn told them his gun had been stolen about 6 weeks before Carla's death. He said he did not report it because he was an ex-convict and did not want trouble with police. Glenn took a polygraph test. He passed. Police believed him and ruled him out as a suspect. The case went cold. Fort Worth police did something very smart, though. They carefully preserved all the evidence from Carla's clothing. They collected DNA samples from her dress and bra. In 1974, DNA testing did not exist yet. But these lab technicians somehow knew that one day, technology would catch up. They stored everything carefully, waiting for that day to come. In 1977, 3 years after the incident, a man named Jimmy Dean Sasser walked into the police station and confessed to taking Carla Walker's life. He was charged, but 7 months later, Jimmy said he made it all up. He said he was depressed about his divorce and wanted attention. With no evidence to support his confession, charges were dropped. Another man also confessed years later, but that too went nowhere. Rodney McCoy, the boyfriend who survived the attack, eventually moved to Alaska. He wanted to be as far from Texas as possible. He married and had children, but he never forgot that night. He carried guilt for 46 years, wondering if he could have done more to save Carla. Carla's younger brother Jim never forgot either. He took college classes in criminal psychology, trying to understand how someone could do this. He applied to become a police officer, hoping to eventually become a detective and solve his sister's case. But an eye condition prevented him from joining the force. Their father died in 1987. Their mother died in 2015. Neither of them ever knew who was responsible for their daughter's death. In 2019, Detective Leah Wagner took over Fort Worth's cold case unit. Carla's brother Jim called her and told her about his sister. Detective Wagner admitted she knew nothing about the case. Jim and his sister Cindy explained everything. Detective Wagner added Carla's case to her list. She and another officer began re-investigating. They talked to Rodney again. They interviewed people who lived in the area in 1974. But they kept hitting dead ends. Then they remembered the preserved DNA evidence from 1974. Testing it would cost $20,000, money the police department did not have. A woman named Diane had gone to high school with Carla. She heard about the case on a true crime podcast. She decided to attend CrimeCon, a true crime convention. At the convention, Diane handed out pamphlets about Carla's case to famous investigators, including Paul Holes, the detective who helped catch the Golden State Killer. Paul Holes was moved by the story. He contacted his production team at the Oxygen Network. They agreed to pay for the DNA testing. The DNA was sent to a company called Othram, which specializes in testing old, degraded DNA. They developed a full DNA profile, but when they searched databases, they found no match. Then they used something new: forensic genetic genealogy. This technology can identify distant relatives by examining over 500,000 genetic markers. On July 4, 2020, they got a hit. The DNA pointed to the McCurley family. There were two men named Glenn McCurley, father and son. The father had died before Carla's death. That left Glenn McCurley Jr. Police realized this was the same Glenn McCurley they had interviewed in 1974, the one who claimed his gun was stolen and passed a polygraph. Glenn was now 77 years old. He had been married to his wife Judy for 56 years. In fact, they were married at the time of Carla's death. The night Glenn took Carla's life was his 11th wedding anniversary. His wife and children had been out of town visiting family. For 46 years, Glenn lived a completely normal life. He worked as a truck driver and maintenance man. He went to church every Sunday. He was known as a kind, God-fearing man. Neighbors loved him. He was a grandfather. People described him as sweet and friendly. Glenn and Judy lost their son Craig in 1988 when Craig was killed by a drunk driver. Craig was 24 years old. Here is something that will send chills down your spine. Craig's grave was located right next to Carla Walker's grave. For over 30 years, every time Glenn visited his son's grave, he was standing right next to the grave of the girl he had criminally assaulted and taken from this world. Nobody suspected him. He was just a normal old man. But now, DNA technology had finally caught up with him. Police needed to be certain. They waited for trash day and collected bags from Glenn's garbage cans. Inside, they found a straw. The DNA on it was a perfect match to the DNA found on Carla's clothing in 1974. On September 10, 2020, detectives went to Glenn's home. Glenn and his wife Judy were there. The detectives asked if they remembered a case from 1974 about a girl named Carla Walker who was kidnapped from a bowling alley parking lot. Glenn said, "Nope, never heard of her." Judy said, "Oh yes, I remember that case. So sad. That poor girl. They never caught the perpetrator." The detectives told Glenn they knew he had been interviewed back in 1974. Would he be willing to give them a DNA sample now so they could officially rule him out? Glenn agreed. He swabbed the inside of his mouth with a Q-tip and handed it back to police. As they were leaving, Judy said she hoped Carla's perpetrator would be caught soon because her life mattered and she deserved to be remembered. 11 days later, the DNA results came back. It was a 100% match. On September 21st, 2020, police arrived at Glenn McCurley's home with an arrest warrant. The 77-year-old man was placed in handcuffs and charged with a capital offense involving Carla Walker, 46 years after he took her life. His neighbors stood outside in shock, watching this man they knew as Sweet Mr. Glenn being put into a police car. His wife Judy was devastated. She told police her husband had cancer and was supposed to go to a doctor's appointment that day. Police did not care. Glenn was taken to jail. News of the arrest spread quickly across the nation. Cold case arrests always draw attention, but this one shocked people because Glenn seemed so ordinary. He was not a known criminal. He was a church-going grandfather. For Carla's family, the arrest brought both relief and sadness. Her brother Jim had just been 12 years old when she died. Now he was in his 50s. His parents had died without ever knowing who was responsible for their daughter's death. Rodney McCoy, now in his 60s, finally had answers. But it also reopened the trauma of that night. Glenn was charged with capital offense. His bail was set at $100,000. He initially pleaded not guilty. During the investigation, prosecutors found something shocking. The .22 Ruger pistol Glenn claimed was stolen in 1974 had actually been hidden inside his house the entire time. He had lied to police all those years ago. Prosecutors prepared to present DNA evidence, witness testimony from Rodney, and a confession Glenn gave to detectives. In the confession video, Glenn admitted he had been drinking whiskey and beer while driving around Fort Worth that night. He said he saw Carla and Rodney in the car and got carried away. He told detectives, "I took advantage of her, I guess. I ended her life, I guess. I'm guilty, I guess, for what happened to that little girl." But he never showed real remorse. He acted annoyed, like this was just an inconvenience. On the third day of trial, Glenn suddenly changed his plea to guilty. But even then, he was not remorseful. When asked if he was responsible for Carla Walker's death, he said, "I guess I did." When asked if he was at the bowling alley that night, he said, "I guess I was. You all say I was, so I guess I was." He told people he pleaded guilty because he was tired of being hounded. Glenn Samuel McCurley was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. On July 14, 2023, less than 2 years into his sentence, Glenn McCurley died in prison of natural causes at age 80. He never served a long sentence, but he died as an inmate and a known criminal. For Carla's family, his death did not change much. They already had their closure from his guilty plea. But many questions remain. Detectives believe Glenn may have harmed other women. He was considered a person of interest in at least 3 other unsolved cases of young women in the Fort Worth area during the 1970s and 1980s. The way he abducted, assaulted, and harmed Carla showed planning and experience. Experts said his actions did not look like someone committing their first violent crime. But Glenn took those secrets to his grave. Those families may never get answers. In December 2024, U.S. Senators John Cornyn and Peter Welch introduced the Carla Walker Act in Congress. This legislation would provide $5 million annually in federal grant funds to support forensic genetic genealogy DNA analysis to help solve cold cases across America. The bill is named in honor of Carla because her case proved that even after nearly 50 years, justice can still be served when science, determination, and community support come together. If passed, this act will help law enforcement agencies solve previously unsolvable cases, identify criminals, exonerate innocent people, and bring closure to families who've waited decades for answers. Carla's brother Jim, who never stopped fighting for his sister, has become a strong advocate for this legislation. He says his sister's name will now help bring justice to countless other victims. Carla Walker is buried at Greenwood Memorial Park in Fort Worth, Texas. If alive today, she would be 68 years old. Her story reminds us that evil can hide behind the most ordinary faces, that justice may be delayed, but it can still arrive, and that we must never give up on the victims who cannot speak for themselves. If this case showed you the power of modern DNA technology and the importance of never giving up on cold cases, please share this video to spread awareness about how science is finally bringing justice to victims and their families after decades. Subscribe to our channel as we continue sharing true crime stories that honor victims and remind us that even the most ordinary-looking people can hide the darkest secrets. Stay alert and aware, because monsters do not always look like monsters.